Gabe Perreault signs his ELC with the New York Rangers. What will his role be on Wednesday night against the Wild? And plus, we discuss K'Andre Miller's uncertain future with the team.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1280 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, and we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So today, sort of a continuation of yesterday's episode. Yesterday's show was, of course, the Gabe Perreault show, and we discussed everything having to do with Gabe Perreault, everything from his awesome numbers in college with BC to his decision to sign his ELC. We actually recorded right before the contract was signed. I presented some reasons why I would have preferred if this would have waited until the fall. But bottom line, I'm human, just like you guys are. This is the Rangers' biggest prospect, and I am very excited to see what he can do and how he'll be used in what figures to be his NHL debut Wednesday night in Madison Square Garden against the Minnesota Wild. As far as a quick recap of yesterday's episode and some of the reasons why I was hoping that this could wait until the fall for Gabe Perreault to, sign his ELC. We'll do that first, and then we'll get to some of the reasons why I'm excited to, see him make his NHL debut and very likely play in all of these final 8 games for the Rangers here. But, my thinking was that if he signs now, it burns a year of his entry-level contract, and I'm certainly not the only person to point that out. It's less than ideal because, again, there are only 8 games to go here unless the Rangers, go on a rampage here and end up playing beyond that, but color me skeptical about that. Beyond that, you've also got just the simple fact that, he'd be skipping the AHL, at least for now. That's not to say if Gabe Perreault plays in these 8 games at the end of this season that he can't start next year in the AHL, get some valuable time with the Hartford Wolfpack, but that certainly was a concern. On top of that, he's also got a coach right now that probably is on his last legs, probably won't be back next season, and that's maybe not necessarily the best situation that he could possibly be in. And then on top of that, the final thing is that the Ranger locker room has seen better days. We'll just leave it at that. But bottom line, now it's time to talk about the fun stuff, the good stuff, and the reasons to be excited about Gabe Perreault again. Very likely making his NHL debut. As of this recording, again, let me say that again. As of this recording, it could change later today. It could change tomorrow. That's certainly possible. But as of this recording, the Rangers have not definitively said that Gabe Perreault is going to be in the lineup on Wednesday. But that's where the smart money is. I just can't imagine they're going to have this kid sign his ELC and then throw him in the press box so that, Nicolas Aube-Kubel could play. And nothing against him at all, but this is in some ways, the future of your team. This is the guy that is largely considered the best prospect in the Ranger organization, certainly the one with the most upside. And with that being the case, I think that certainly they're going to look to get him out there and, see what he can do. But again, as far as the positive reasons, apart from just the overall excitement of everything, he does get his first taste of NHL action here. It will be somewhat limited, but at least, 8 games here to see what it's all about, to kind of have an idea of how he stacks up against, these other pro players and what areas of his game must improve heading into next season. That's probably a good thing. In theory, and I stress in theory, but Gabe Perreault could spark this team. The reason why I'm a little bit skeptical about him doing that is that we're 74 games into the season, and save for a couple of, good runs here and there really hasn't been anything to spark this Ranger team, if we're being completely honest. But in theory, I suppose Gabe Perreault could do it. And another thing that I like about this, too, is he gets a chance to meet his teammates. He was at practice a little bit earlier today. I think practice might actually be ongoing as I'm recording this, but he's out there with some guys that he's probably meeting for the first time, and that's a good thing, too. Not all of them will be back next season, but a good amount of them will be. A lot of these guys are obviously under contract, and it's good for Gabe Perreault to introduce himself, get familiar with them, and maybe even build a little bit of chemistry, depending on how they use him over these final 8 games and who he spends the majority of his ice time with. And one more good reason, as far as like a positive, why it's a good thing that Gabe Perreault has signed his ELC. we don't have to deal with a potentially chilly relationship between Gabe Perreault and the Ranger organization because we've been down that road before. Things didn't go so well between Vitaly Kravtsov and the Rangers. Things didn't go so well between Elias Anderson and the Rangers. And the fact that the two of them were drafted too early and didn't obviously make it in the NHL, that's kind of irrelevant for what we're talking about here. The bottom line, you want to establish a good relationship with a player that is going to be tremendously important to your team's future. I mean, that's the bottom line. And yeah, Drury could have played some hard ball and tried to get him to sign in the fall rather than right now to save that 1 year. But by that same token, I mean, how mad do you want to make this guy, right? How upset do you want to make this player? If he wants to sign now, that's obviously his preference. And you don't want to drive a wedge between yourself and the player so early in his go here with the New York Rangers organization. Perreault could come back over the top and say, okay, well, you don't want to let me sign. I'm going back to college for my junior year. And if that's the case, then that means the Rangers won't be able to have him play for them for most of next season, at least not until, BC's season were to end next season, whenever that might happen. But you get the idea. You can certainly understand and appreciate why it could be a good thing that Perreault is signing his ELC now. The one area, though, that I mentioned in yesterday's episode, talked about it very briefly just a second ago. This is the one area where I'm not going to budge. And obviously, it's not up to me. And I know some people are going to agree with me. Some people are going to disagree with me. That's completely fine. But I want Gabe Perreault next season spending at least some time in the AHL with the Hartford Wolfpack. I referenced a lot of the players on the Rangers that skipped the AHL entirely earlier in their careers when they were 18 years old, 19 years old, 20, whatever it was. Guys like Lafreniere, Kakko, K'Andre Miller, even to a lesser extent. It hasn't really gone all that well. And I'm not saying that that's the only reason, but I just feel like going from college hockey to the NHL, that's a heck of a jump. And we're probably about 24 hours away from seeing Gabe Perreault do exactly that. But in all likelihood, it'll only be for 8 games this year. And then you have him start next year with the Wolfpack. Let him, even if it's only like 20 games or so, we can be patient. We can wait, get to a situation next year where Perreault does some good things with the Wolfpack, improves the parts of his game that he needs to work on, like the physicality. That seems to be the book on him right now, is that he's probably ready to go in the NHL in most aspects, except the one area where people seem to be in agreement where he's not ready is the physicality. And obviously he can work on that in the offseason a little bit, bulk up a little bit, add some weight. But be that as it may, I'm willing to err on the side of caution just a little bit. Let's just pump the brakes a little bit. There's plenty of time for Gabe Perreault to establish himself as a star with the Rangers, which is what we hope happens. But next year, give me just 20 games in the AHL. If that's all it takes, if he's just like lighting that league on fire and skating circles around everybody, and you get to a position where the Rangers have a role for him that is not the fourth line, and it's not 6 minutes a night, then by all means call him up at that point. But again, I do think it makes sense for him to start there next season. But again, like I mentioned a minute ago, I mean, I'm a Ranger fan just like all of you. I'm happy to see what this kid can do in these final 8 games here, even if it wasn't, my ideal situation with him signing right now. But yeah, as of now, like I said, no confirmation that he'll be in the lineup. Certainly looks like he will be. I thought this was interesting too. We now know what jersey number that Perreault is going to wear. He's going to wear number 94. That was his father's number, Yannick Perreault, and I'm sure that name is familiar for a lot of you. Yannick was a center who played in parts of 16 seasons in the NHL with the Leafs, the Kings, the Leafs again, the Canadiens, the Predators, the Coyotes, the Leafs for a third time, and finally the Blackhawks. The 2007-2008 season was his last. So obviously a very strong career for his father. And I don't know, if you want to get Perreault's jersey, I mean, I get it. Again, there's a lot of excitement in the air right now. Anytime you get a top prospect about to make his debut, I might hold off until next season. It could be a situation where he ends up changing numbers, although the fact that it was his father's number, that makes me think that he's going to stick with that. But there's no guarantees. I would probably wait. If you're a jersey buff, you want to go out and get a Perreault, I would say maybe wait until next season when he, is back with the Rangers and we get some confirmation that, that's going to be his number. Or if he himself confirms that, yeah, this is going to be my number going forward. This is the number that I want to wear, and that's how I'm going to roll. Probably wait until at least that happens. I also thought this was interesting. We've gotten on some of the veterans on this team off and on throughout the entire season. Pretty much every Ranger fan has. And I don't think it's been unwarranted. But it must be said that Chris Kreider and Vincent Trocheck both reach out to Gabe Perreault to kind of welcome him to the team. This per Perreault himself. And Kreider was asked about, the experience of going right from college, jumping right into the NHL a couple of days later. So Kreider had to say, and I thought this was an interesting perspective since he did the same thing. I found that there's just so much information being thrown at you that at times it's easy to play your game in certain moments because it's all you can really do. There's so much going on, but at the end of the day, it's still hockey. There's a reason that he's had success his whole life and a reason that he's here right now, regardless of what happens. It's just a fantastic learning experience. I'm just really hoping he enjoys it and has fun. And so that was obviously cool to hear. One of the Ranger veterans, or actually two of the Ranger veterans, Kreider and Trocheck, both reaching out to Perreault and hopefully making sure that he's comfortable and he's got everything he needs and that he's ready to go. One other thing that I know a lot of people are going to be interested in is where does Gabe Perreault line up when the puck drops on Wednesday? Again, this is assuming that he's in the lineup, which, like I said, I think is a pretty safe assumption at this point. But it's actually interesting because I had this very same conversation with Derek, who is the host of New York's #2 sports show. Derek does an awesome job on his show covering the Rangers, the Yankees, and the Giants. Those are his three favorite teams, and there's probably some people listening to this that I'm sure are Giants fans, I'm sure are Yankee fans, and obviously some Ranger fans too. So definitely give his show a chance whenever you get a minute. Had a lot of fun talking with Derek, but we talked about the same thing. Where do you put Perreault in the lineup? For me, it's tempting to put him right out there with Artemi Panarin. See if we can't give him the old Artemi Panarin bump. We've seen over the years, ever since Panarin basically has come to New York, every single player, or just about every single player that is on a line with Panarin, they do see an uptick in their stats. They do see an uptick in their productivity and really just their overall play. Can we get that with Gabe Perreault and Artemi Panarin right off the bat here? It's at least possible. But my favorite, and I think Derek agreed with me on this, was my ideal line combinations. You put Perreault on what I guess would be considered the second line with JT Miller and Will Cooley. You've got some guys that are out there willing to do some of the dirty work, and Perreault can kind of just do his thing and take advantage of the skills that he possesses. And in so doing that, I would then bump Lafreniere from the second line down to the third line with Kreider and Mika. It looks like the Rangers are doing part of that, but not the whole thing. Basically, there's some breaking news on social media here as we're recording this. The Rangers at practice today have Perreault with JT Miller and Alexis Lafreniere. So going by that, it sounds like Will Cooley would be the one to switch lines. I would think that would mean he'll be with Kreider and Mika, which is fine. Again, I like my combos better, but this is cool too. Bottom line, Perreault, I wasn't 100% sure they would have him in the top 6 right away. And if he's out there with JT Miller and Alexis Lafreniere, that has to be considered the Rangers' second line. So that's pretty cool. They'll throw him right into the deep end and just see what he can do. I'm definitely looking forward to watching him do this. And one other thing that I thought was also kind of interesting is that apparently Gabe Perreault and Brian Othman from rookie camp over the past couple of years, the two of them have become pretty good friends. Sounds like they were hanging out at the hotel last night once Gabe Perreault got there. And it sounds like they're planning on heading to Madison Square Garden for the game together. So that's already a cool thing. Brian Othman, seasoned veteran, gritty player, right? No, but compared to Perreault, right? He was up for a couple of games last year with Othman, and he's been up this season as well. And very cool to see the two of them. Obviously they've hit it off in the rookie camp, and hopefully this is a friendship that can continue for years to come here, because the two of them, man, you think about the styles of hockey that they play, and they're not going to be on the same line right off the bat here. But I think Ranger fans, a lot of us could probably get on board with that, for that being kind of a long-term thing with the Rangers, with Othman and Perreault playing on the same line with each other. I think that could definitely work. And the fact that they're already, becoming friends and seem to have good chemistry together, that's a good thing too. So let's see what happens, man. Again, my perfect scenario was Perreault signing in the fall, but that's not what happened. They signed him right now, and let's go. Let's see what the kid can do, and let's keep our fingers crossed that against all odds, he can spark this team here. But in just a second, we're going to shift our attention to K'Andre Miller. I've been meaning to get to this for a couple of episodes now. We're finally there. We're going to talk about some comments that Miller had in a recent Vince Mercogliano article, where he talks about just about everything, how the season has gone, his ups, his downs, his future with the team. He had some interesting comments. Going to break those down and then share my opinion on, what might happen with K'Andre Miller in the future. Going to be doing all that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that is both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they are packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It is the perfect grab and go snack for busy days. The satisfying crack of opening each shell, it is like snack meditation. Whether you're running between meetings or dropping off the kids, Wonderful Pistachios are the snack that works just as hard as you do. Get snackin' and get crackin' with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Huge shout out to the everydayers as always. In our next episode, going to be talking about Chris Kreider's future with the New York Rangers. We're sort of about to do that with K'Andre Miller here. Want to kind of expand this discussion to Chris Kreider in the next episode, another Ranger that I think is facing a future with this team that is uncertain at best. So we will discuss that. Could they trade him? Could a buyout even be in the works in the offseason? Are we watching the final couple of games with Chris Kreider as a member of the New York Rangers? All those are questions that will be answered in due time. But for right now, like I said, let's put the focus on another player that I think has at least a somewhat uncertain future with the New York Rangers, and that is, of course, K'Andre Miller. So we're going to, in just a little bit here, discuss all the Rangers' options with Miller as it pertains to either trading him or extending him in the offseason. I'm going to have my final opinion on the whole thing at the end of the show. But the first thing I wanted to do was take a look at this article by Vince Mercogliano, where he kind of spotlights K'Andre Miller and, asks him a whole bunch of questions. And I thought Miller provided some pretty interesting answers. Miller, like I said, had been asked about, the whole season, all the ups and downs of everything. And he talked a little bit about focusing on some things other than hockey and how that's helped him a little bit. This is what K'Andre Miller had to say on that subject. I'm reading more, just doing a little bit more to keep my mind off the couple hours we're not talking hockey. And I know some people are going to jump on that and, why doesn't he want to talk hockey? Does he not have passion for the game? I've said this in the past. I think it's okay for these guys to not be hockey playing robots. I think it's okay for them to have certain interests, certain hobbies outside of the game of hockey, provided, of course, that it's not, affecting their play in any major way, because obviously that is their job and they're all paid very handsomely to do that job. Hey, if he's a reader, that's awesome. Mika Zibanejad is a DJ. Alexis Lafreniere is doing, salad deals, and Sam Carrick and his brothers have that syrup company. So it's okay. These guys are allowed to do things outside of playing hockey, provided, of course, that, their heads are in the game when it's time for the puck to drop and, doing everything they can to get ready to play hockey on any given night. This is what else he had to say about just all the noise at the beginning of the year when, everything was kind of swirling and the Rangers were in some dangerous waters, shall we say, in terms of just, everything that was going wrong on the ice and all the drama away from the ice. So what Miller had to say about that. I had a hard time at the beginning of the year just blocking out noise. Things were getting to me that usually don't. I just tried to push those things to the side the last couple of months and come to the rink with a big smile on my face and play hockey. I tried to get that feeling of confidence and just bringing my energy and upbeat vibes that I know I can. Hearing that, it makes me think of something that one of you pointed this out to me on social media, and I apologize, I don't remember who it was, but I think it was a situation where Brodzinski had scored a goal, and I think he did one of the intermission reports. Obviously, they talk to the players between the periods on MSG or whatever network, and, Brodzinski was happy and he was smiling, and somebody made the point to me, like, man, like, does anybody on this team ever smile? Like, it was so striking to see Brodzinski looking happy and smiling. I think this Ranger team could honestly, stand to smile a little more. And I realize, look, when you're going 4-15, there's not much to smile about. And I think it would look bad if players were smiling in a stretch like that. But I don't know. It just feels like all the joy from this team is gone. Nobody really seems to have all that much fun playing hockey anymore. So I think there is something to that. You're playing hockey for a living, man, and you're making 7 figures to do it. You should be able to, pull some happiness out of that, I would think. And as far as like blocking out the noise, I mean, I don't know exactly what he's talking about there. That could be like noise about his contract. That could be noise, from the fans, either things that he hears them saying or things that get said on social media about him. And that brings me to another point. If you're a pro athlete, just delete all your social media accounts. I don't think there's anything to be gained by being on social media if you're a pro athlete. You guys know as well as I do, anybody that does the whole social media game, it can be a very toxic and very nasty place. And I just don't think there's anything to be gained, if you're an active pro athlete from being on there. Because even if things are going well, even if the team is winning and you're doing well, there's going to be people chewing you out for things. And, it's just not good. So, yeah, probably best just to avoid that as much as possible. He also, K'Andre Miller, gave credit to Will Borgen. The two of them have obviously spent a ton of time together. We had the Jacob Trouba trade, and then not too long after that, we had Kako get traded. Will Borgen comes in. And for the most part, those two have pretty much been connected at the hip. Every now and then, you'll see Miller with Fox, or they might try something a little bit different. But for the most part, that's been the pairing for the Rangers and a go-to pairing for Laviolette. And this is what Miller had to say about that. While chuckling, he said, "It's been a change, that's for sure, but it's been good. I've got nothing but good things to say about Borgs. He's been playing the game the right way." And yeah, Miller also went on to say that he thinks the size that they both have and the skating that they both possess, that allows them to close plays quickly and recover from their mistakes, which sort of, yeah. I mean, there's times where that's been true. That's a fair assessment. There's other times where mistakes have been made by either one of them, really, and the puck has ended up in the back of the net. So, but overall, I think Miller is better off with Borgen certainly than he was with Trouba. There have been ups and downs. I know that, as far as like the metrics are concerned, and we might dive into that in a little bit if we have some time to do that a little bit later in the episode. The metrics when Miller has been away from Trouba are quite a bit better. They're not fantastic, but it kind of suggests that you're at least getting average to slightly above average defenseman play from K'Andre Miller in the time that he spent, away from Jacob Trouba. I'm a little bit more of an eye test guy, but, I think it does make sense to reference those metrics every once in a while. And then as far as like trade chatter is concerned, this is what Miller had to say. I've done a pretty good job of just putting it on the back burner for this year. I'm just worrying about getting better every day, pushing my teammates to be better, and really demanding the best out of myself. When the contract comes, it comes. Yeah, that's a good mindset to have. I mean, bottom line, this season is going to end one way or another. We don't know exactly how it's going to end for the Rangers, but at that time, Miller will, of course, be an RFA with arbitration rights, and putting his best foot forward for these last couple of games here, it can only help him. If he wants to convince the Rangers to keep him around, then that's the best way to do it. And regardless of where he ends up, I mean, this is what I always talk about. When a player is up for a new contract, even for selfish reasons, you got to lay it all on the line every single night, because that'll help you for your next contract. And that's why I've just been kind of so, I guess, like, perplexed is a good word about K'Andre Miller's dip in play this season, because like he knows he's got a contract coming up, right? Maybe that's in his head a little bit. I mean, going by these comments, it sounds like he's at least given it some thought. That's at least possible. Maybe once he has a new contract, whether it's with the Rangers or some other team, maybe that settles him a little bit and he relaxes and gets back to playing hockey and just enjoying himself out there. But yeah, not a good season right now for K'Andre Miller to have what I would think would be probably his weakest season of the 5 that he's played in the NHL. And one more thing here, we've gotten on Miller at times this season, but it does seem like, going by this last quote, that he does appreciate being a New York Ranger. And there's times where I'm honestly like kind of in awe of how much players still want to come to the Rangers, how much players seem to want to stay with the New York Rangers, because we're talking about a team that has one cup in 85 years. And this season, by and large, has been a disaster. I know they're still mathematically alive, and I get that. And at least we have that to hang on to for the last bunch of games here. But players like to play here, and I don't think Miller is really any exception. He says, "I've been fortunate to call it home for the last 5 years. I hope to call it home for a couple more." So he's not giving you a whole lot. You don't want to go overboard if you're an impending RFA, UFA, whatever it might be, because then you lose some of your leverage, right? If they know that you love being a Ranger, and I love New York City, and I love my coaches, and I love the fans, and I love the place where I live, whatever it might be, then all of a sudden they've got you a little bit. But he did compliment, the Rangers and said that he likes being here and would like to stay without going overboard. So I think that's a good thing for sure as well. I can always appreciate when players do feel that way. In just a minute, though, we're going to assess everything with K'Andre Miller going forward, and I'm going to discuss what I think the outcome could be and what I would do if I was the New York Rangers as it pertains to K'Andre Miller. We will get to that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it is easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is not just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. You've got all in one convenience. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Easy collaboration. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without all the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off of your first year. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up today's episode here on K'Andre Miller. I'm going to basically just kind of have some final thoughts here and give my verdict at the end of the show. So, bottom line, I guess I'll just spoil it now. I'm in favor of the Rangers trading K'Andre Miller when this season ends. I don't say that lightly. I don't take any joy in that. It's nothing personal against K'Andre Miller. I'm sure he's a great guy. It just comes down to business for me and where his game is right now versus where it was a couple of years ago. Because for my money, he's regressed in the last, certainly this year and maybe even the last 2 seasons. I do want to at least present some reasons why the Rangers could look to extend Miller, though, because I know he's got some fans and there's some people that probably want him to stick around. One thing for sure, to me at least, is the uncertainty that the Rangers have on the blue line. The Ranger defenseman group has seen better days, and obviously K'Andre Miller is part of that, but you've had a lot of turnover this year. Trouba's gone. Lindgren is gone. The blue line options are really dwindling for this team. Drew Fortescue, he was playing with Perreault at BC. Got to figure he's at least a year away. I haven't seen anything about him, signing his ELC or anything like that. Emery, it's probably the same deal. I don't think he would be here as soon as next season. So the prospects aren't really here yet. And then you've also got some guys that have left. On top of that, I feel like K'Andre Miller, he honestly, for as much as he struggled at times this season, he might be the best option that the Rangers have to pair with Adam Fox next season. When they traded for Carson Soucy, I kind of had him earmarked for that role, and maybe that will be what ends up happening. But Soucy hasn't exactly, set the world on fire since he's been here. I think that's fair to say. There's times where he's scuffled. Of course, he could always pick it up if he's got an entire offseason with this team in the preseason and whatnot. But I don't think it's been great. You could put Schneider with Fox, but he would have to switch sides. I mean, you could do that. That's certainly an option. I mean, Vakanainen, they had him and Fox together for, a little while there. But, I mean, Vakanainen, to me, there's nothing about him that says first pair defenseman. I don't mind Vakanainen in a number 6 role, a number 7 role, depending on who else is around. But partner with Adam Fox on the top pairing, getting top pair minutes, I'm not really all about that either. So he really might be the best option. When you look at the free agent market, there aren't really a ton of imposing left-handed defensemen, guys that you would really want to go out of your way to go out and get and sign to a big money contract. As far as lefty defensemen, there's 2 that kind of stand out above the pack, and I don't think either one of these guys are superstars either, but they're at least solid, proven defensemen. Vladislav Gavrikov is one of them. Ivan Provorov is another one. So those could be options, but you'd probably end up spending about the same money on them, or maybe even more on them, as you would spend on K'Andre Miller. And on top of that, they're both quite a bit older than Miller. Neither one's that old, but they're both around 29 or 30. I think without checking, I'm not 100% on this, I think Gavrikov is 29 and Provorov is 30. But like I said, I could be off by a year or 2 either way, but you get the idea. They're both older than Miller, who is 25, and nobody else really stands out. So your lack of options, that might entice you to bring back K'Andre Miller if you're Chris Drury and the New York Rangers. But as far as the reasons to trade him and why I think I would still do this, for starters, the cost and the salary cap ramifications. I would think if the Rangers do re-sign Miller, you're probably looking at a 2-year deal, no less and no more, because a 2-year deal, that gets him through his final 2 years of arbitration eligibility, and the year after that, he would be a UFA. And I feel like if they were going to bring him back, it would probably just be for those 2 years. We'll cross the UFA bridge when we get to it, and if nothing else, having Miller for 2 more years, that at least gives some time for guys like the aforementioned Fortescue, the aforementioned Emery to develop and become options for this Ranger team. So there's that to consider. But even if they do keep it to just 2 years, it's not going to be cheap. K'Andre Miller right now is at $3.872 million per season. him and his camp a couple months ago, there was a report they were looking for a significant raise. I can't imagine that's changed. I mean, if they were looking for it then, I don't think they're going to, step down in their contract demands. And, arbitration, if it comes down to that, that's never really a fun experience for anybody. But, maybe it does come down to that. Who's to say for sure? But, if you look at the salary cap in this league, which is always being juggled, right now per Puckpedia, the Rangers are only projected to have $10.61 million in cap space going into next season. Do you want to spend half of that or more than half of that on K'Andre Miller? I don't know that I do. And when you look at the other contracts on this team, there's quite a few players right now that have contracts that are at best questionable or at best, make you worry a little bit. You can look at Mika Zibanejad at $8.5 million per season. Chris Kreider at $6.5 million. I still think he'll be traded, but bottom line, Kreider right now is under contract at $6.5 million per season. Lafreniere at $7.45 million. That's not looking so good all of a sudden. Adam Fox at $9.5 million. I don't know that he's played up to that price tag. And of course, Igor at $11.5 million. And, Igor's great, but the Rangers were really bidding against themselves and kind of went overboard with that. And then there's other guys you could throw out there, Trocheck, Borgen, JT Miller. I wouldn't go too far with them. I think they're all signed to a fair price, at least as of now. But JT Miller toward the end of that deal isn't going to be looking good. I don't know how many more big contracts you can afford, especially with K'Andre Miller, when you're not sure how it's going to go, if he's going to live up to that contract, especially when you consider that he's having a subpar season even now. Another reason is that, there's a simple reason here, but his play has regressed. The everydayers, you guys know how I feel about this. 2 years into his career, thought we had a homegrown, legitimate superstar player on our hands. Or if not a superstar, at least a very, very good player. But, recently, it's just hard to see him the same way. That there's things that he just doesn't do that well. He doesn't take the body the way you'd like to see him do it. He gets caught out of position. He seems to have mental lapses at some inopportune times. Even the offense has declined a little bit. Now, in fairness, what I will say in Miller's defense here, everything I just said about him, you could basically say the same thing or most of the same things for just about every other New York Ranger defenseman this season. Just about everybody has taken a step back. And in the case of guys like Ryan Lindgren and Jacob Trouba, it basically cost them their spot on the roster. And obviously with Lindgren, it had more to do with the fact that, the Rangers were in a situation where they couldn't hang on to their impending UFAs. They had to get what they could get for them on the trade market, and that's what they did. But be that as it may, a lot of Rangers took a step back this year. In the case of Trouba and Lindgren, it resulted in them no longer playing with the New York Rangers. So another reason I'll throw out there is that I do think despite Miller's struggles this season, Rangers could get a good amount for him. Really think about this. Really think about what we saw at the trade deadline this season, right? So you've got a situation where it was very much a seller's market, and you're seeing guys that are not star players, not even really anything other than average players, and they're getting second round draft picks in exchange, in some case first round picks. I wrote down a couple of them right here. The Rangers basically got a second rounder for Ryan Lindgren. I know there were other pieces in that trade, but the meat and potatoes of that trade was Lindgren for a second rounder. So there was that. You had Brandon Tanev fetching a second rounder. You had Luke Shen getting a second rounder. Anthony Bolivier got a second rounder. Brian Dumoulin got a second rounder. And I know they're not all defensemen, but you get the idea. These guys are not superstar players at all, and they're getting big returns. If all those guys can get you second rounders, I gotta believe Miller can get you a first rounder, or maybe a second, 2 seconds maybe, or a second and a third, something along those lines. You could get a serious haul for K'Andre Miller. And that's even more true when you consider what I talked about just a minute ago, the fact that there aren't a ton of top of the line lefty defenseman available in free agency this year. So if you're looking to add a lefty defenseman, your options are limited, and the Rangers could really kind of control the narrative here and demand a lot for K'Andre Miller. And again, this is probably obvious, but I wouldn't give away K'Andre Miller just to do it. I'm not going to ship him away for a 4th round pick. But the bottom line, if you can get something significant in return for him, I think you owe it to yourself to at least look at that possibility. But those are my biggest reasons for Miller. Love to hear from you guys as well. Feel free to weigh in on how he's done, if you'd like to see him back, if you'd like to trade him, however you might feel. Lay it on me, and we'll see how it comes up. I get the feeling, it's hard to say how it's going to go, but I get the feeling most Ranger fans are probably at least open to the idea of trading Keandre Miller, if not outright favoring it. I think there's a good chance it's going to probably swing in that direction, but you never know for sure. Definitely let me know how you feel about it. Figure we can call it there. One more announcement that I must throw out there at the end of today's episode. For the Rangers versus Flyers game, which will be April 9th on TNT, we are going to get a reunion between Sam Rosen and John Davidson. It was announced just a short time ago on social media that the two of them are going to call that game together on TNT. So let me say right now, even if you're fed up with this team, you're disgusted by what you've seen this year, and even if you're just tuning into this podcast to keep up on what's going on with this team and you're not even watching them anymore, do yourself a favor, especially if you've been watching the Rangers as long as I have, and tune in for that game. I think that's going to be a really special treat and a really good way for Sam Rosen to kind of wind down here. That's not the last game of the season. I want to say it's like the fourth or fifth to last game, but either way, we're going to get Sam and JD back together for at least one more game, and I think that's going to be a lot of fun. So definitely looking forward to that. Figure we can call it there. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @jchick17. Once again, that's @jchik17, and definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.